Greetings to all of our dear friends all over the United States and around the world. Once again, Karen and I appreciate the opportunity to share with you some of what the Lord has been doing through the ministry of the Alliance for Biblical Integrity, even though we haven't been able to connect directly with you folks for some time due to COVID. Until last year, much of my ministry involved teaching in schools, churches, and conferences around the world. But my last international trip was to Word of Life Uganda and Ethiopia in February of 2020, and unfortunately since then I've had 8 international trips canceled altogether. And of course, the pandemic has impacted my travel here in the United States as well, with canceled conferences and reduced ministry opportunities in churches in general. But even with these challenges, ministry has continued just along some paths that I wouldn't have anticipated prior to COVID hitting. Last November, I taught a total of 30 hours by Zoom with Word of Life Hungary, teaching God's plan through the ages, understanding Roman Catholicism, and signs, wonders, and the charismatic movement. Then in January, I recorded 32 hours on Introduction to the Bible that I taught for the National Theological College and Graduate School, which is an accredited program that operates in the Middle East and East Africa. But because of their lack of infrastructure, I had to record those classes individually, upload them to the internet, and then they downloaded them on their site in Uganda and distributed them to students in several countries. Then in April, it was back to 32 hours of Zoom, teaching God's plan through the ages and signs, wonders, and the charismatic movement for Word of Life Ukraine, after being turned back and not allowed to board the plane to Germany in Washington, D.C. because of a change in the COVID rules in transiting through Germany. Then a week after I finished that, I was teaching those same 2 courses for Word of Life Uganda, but this time I had to create videos for that course in my home studio, just as I had done in January due to the lack of reliable internet connection and electricity in Uganda. During this time, I was also teaching the Doctrine of Christ to the adult Sunday school class in our home church for 6 months, then shifted to our young adults class where I taught the charismatic course to that group. And throughout this time, Karen has been teaching one of the children's Sunday school classes in our church every week as well, and also being involved with other parts of the church. In the meantime, I participated in another Zoom symposium with the International Society for Biblical Hermeneutics, of which I'm also a founding director and founding member. And I presented papers on 3 different issues related to the doctrine of salvation, which have since become part of a book with several others on current issues in soteriology, or the doctrine of salvation. I was also invited to write a paper on the QAnon conspiracy theory, which was published in the spring issue of Ariel magazine, and have continued with other writing projects with a couple of books in process as well. Throughout this time, I've served as an elder for 10 years at our home church in Paris, Illinois, but that is going to be changing soon, as we're now in the middle of a move to a small town in Iowa where our son-in-law is the pastor of the town's Bible church. So we'll be within just 3 blocks of them and their church and our grandkids, which is exciting. I just finished another Zoom conference on September 25th for the International Society for Biblical Hermeneutics. And in that session, I spoke on the question, does Jesus teach transubstantiation in John chapter 6? Discussing the relationship of Jesus' teaching in that chapter to the Roman Catholic doctrine of transubstantiation, which they say means that the bread and wine actually turn into literally the body and blood of Christ. My next ministry trip is to the Bible Institute in Scroon Lake in October, where I will be teaching Understanding Roman Catholicism once again, and then in November I have 3 weeks scheduled for Word of Life Hungary. And hopefully by next year I will be able to continue my trips to Philippines, Uganda, Ukraine, and other places. As some of you may have heard, Jimmy DeYoung went home to be with the Lord on August 15th, and I've been doing a segment on his weekend radio program for over 7 years now. So with his homegoing, we're just now in the process of discussing how we might move ahead with that part of our ministry, and we'll keep our supporters informed about this. But in the meantime, I have continued doing broadcasts each week with his sons, Rick and Jimmy Jr. I had mentioned in my last report, in anticipation of losing some church support because of not being able to travel and teach internationally and the effect of the pandemic on giving, I've also been doing freelance work in graphic design as well as book editing and publishing assistance. This has been helpful as we've lost about $600 of monthly support over the past several months, and it looks like we may have just lost another $350 per month, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. So as you can see, we're still very busy in life and ministry, and we're so thankful for faithful partners like you who have stood with us and behind us in ministry all these years. And we look forward to being with you all again as the Lord allows. May the Lord bless you all greatly.